Hello. In this video, I hope to clarify some of the complexities of working with what I call these lawful structures of a PMA, a church, and a trust. So I will explain each one of these structures and then describe how it can be used in connection with the other structures. So let's get into it. We'll start with a PMA, which stands for Private Membership Association. And I have a whole video about that. I encourage you to check it out for more information about a PMA. Essentially, it's an agreement between people, between living men and women, to engage in a contract or a compact or an agreement to interact in a certain way. What this type of agreement does is take the interaction that the people are having out of the public realm and into the private jurisdiction. And this eliminates the need for licensing and regulatory oversight. Now, it has come to my awareness that some people are considering a PMA a tax shelter. That is not my understanding. I would not recommend leaning on a PMA as a tax shelter. It simply takes the business arrangement or the exchange out of the public jurisdiction and into the private jurisdiction. If you are using Federal Reserve notes for that exchange, it would be considered a taxable event. And I suggest redeeming treasury notes as lawful money to shift that dynamic, but that's a different topic, and there's a whole nother video about that as well. So check that out. In addition to eliminating the need for licensing and regulatory oversight, the other reason I really like a PMA is because it gives you an opportunity to get really clear and specific about the parameters and the details of the expectations and exchange that you're engaging in with the members of the private membership association. Another benefit of creating a PMA is it creates a distinct entity, and that can be helpful in relating with these other lawful structures. For example, a PMA could technically be a trustee of a private express trust. Now, this might be complicated because the PMA would be made up of many members. However, it could have a board, and the board of the PMA could be considered a trustee of a trust. Another example is that a PMA could be a beneficiary of a trust, especially maybe a charitable trust. So that would mean that all of the members of the PMA are the beneficiaries of the trust, in addition to whatever other beneficiaries one wanted to include. A PMA could also interact with a church structure in that it could be the container within which the church holds its congregation. So if you establish a church and then you want to define the nature of membership in the church through a private membership association, you could also do that. So I really like a PMA. It's a handy dandy lawful structure that fulfills several needs for me and interacts easily with these other lawful structures, which honestly have a little more gravitas than a PMA. So let's look at a church. Now, the first thing to understand about the lawful structure of a church is that according to the IRS, it will only receive tax exemption if it meets specific and, may I say, rather stringent criteria, and it is articulated very clearly on the IRS website. If you meet these criteria, you can receive automatic tax exemption. First of all, your organization has to claim to be a church or a convention or association of churches, including mosques, temples, and other houses of worship. Your organization must have a mission statement and must be formally organized as a distinct legal entity. I would say lawful structure. And that just means that you have official documentation in place articulating what it is that you are doing. Your organization has to have a distinct, again, legal existence and religious history. a recognized creed, form of worship, and literature of its own, a definite and distinct ecclesiastical government, including a formal code of doctrine and discipline, an organization of ordained ministers selected after completing prescribed courses of study, and established places of worship with regular congregations, religious services, and/or religious instruction for members. So this designation requires quite an organizational structure, as you can see. And here we'll get into the tax status piece a little deeper. So it seems like forever a 501c3 was like the holy grail of tax status, right? This is the traditional nonprofit status for churches and other nonprofit organizations. 501c3, tax deductible, tax exempt. And here we can see some of the requirements for this tax status according to the IRS. Now, I don't know about you, but reading tax code is not like the most exciting thing for me, so I'm just going to jump to the couple of pieces that really stand out here for me. One is that earnings of the organization cannot inure to the benefit of any private shareholder or individual. So if you actually have a for-profit enterprise, attempting to align yourself with a nonprofit status just doesn't make sense. And the other piece that really stands out here to me is the limitation on contributing to political campaigns. So churches who have a 501c3 status are technically not allowed to share political perspective in their services, nor make contributions to any political campaigns. And while that kind of makes sense from the perspective of the separation of church and state, it definitely is a limitation on the actions that a church organization can take. So that is just something to be aware of. Now, while any number of organizations can file for a 501c3 nonprofit status if they meet these requirements, many people are turning to this other option of a 508c1a tax status. Now, one thing to keep in mind as we review subsection 508 is that this is a continuation from the 501. So the terms of a 508 are referring back to a 501. The huge difference between 501c3 and 508c1a is that a 501c3 is applied for and granted by the IRS. So many people who are interested in creating free churches, temples, and ministries are leaning into this 508c1a tax code, which seems on the surface like it offers so much more freedom and flexibility. And in fact, it does, because you don't apply, you just assume this tax status. So whereas you need to apply and be approved for a 501c3, as long as you are acting in alignment with the requirements, you can assume a 508c1a tax status. And when people read this, they get really excited. So there's a mandatory exception for churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and conventions or association of churches. Amazing. So the 508c1a feels like the holy grail of tax exempt status when we stumble upon it and we read, oh my goodness, mandatory exceptions for churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and conventions or association of churches. Yes, I'm starting a church, I'm opening my ministry, 508c1a, tax-free, boom. However, in that excitement, we can get distracted from or forget the definition of a church. And really, this is referring back to the IRS's definition of a church. And just to review, what they're looking for is literature of your own, regular congregations, a distinct legal or lawful existence, distinct religious history, regular religious services, established places of worship, organization of ordained ministers, formal code of doctrine and discipline, recognized creed and form of worship, schools for the preparation of its members, definite and distinct ecclesiastical government. That's the internal operating structure of the organization. Sunday schools for the religious instruction of the young, or maybe that would be a Saturday school or a Wednesday school. Membership not associated with any other church or denomination. That's a limitation. Ordained ministers are selected after completing prescribed courses of study. So basically, what they are looking for is religion. They are looking for an established religion. And of course, you are welcome to create your own religion. However, it would need to adhere to these guidelines in order for it to be considered a church in the eyes of the IRS and therefore be deserving of the tax exempt status. So, on the one hand, you are totally free to create your own temple or ministry in whatever way you see fit. However, don't expect it to be a tax shelter for you unless you are adhering to the IRS's requirements. As I mentioned before, you can give the church organization a PMA to contain and define the congregation. You could give the church a private express irrevocable trust or a charitable trust to manage the resources of the church and navigate commerce for the church organization. So you can see in this way, a church can be an umbrella organization. You could establish and found a church, give it a PMA to hold its congregation, give it a trust to navigate commerce for it. And so those other lawful structures would be held within the structure of the church. Alternatively, a trust could be an umbrella organization, and the trust could establish a church that's given a PMA to contain its congregation. And then the PMA could become the beneficiaries of the charitable trust. Now, why would you want to establish a trust? Well, a trust can act as a vessel. Trusts have been called natural persons as opposed to a legal person, which is like a corporation. Natural person is a term that's usually used to refer to living men and women and imbues a private express trust with the same capabilities as people. So this is why a trust can create a PMA or establish a church or open a bank account. And then the organization of the trust operates these other entities instead of an individual. So this is an excellent strategy for long-term organizational structures. If you are creating a legacy that will live on beyond you and you want to go ahead and set up the structure to hold that now, a trust may be your best option. So just to review these three lawful structures and how they interact, both a church and a trust could act as an umbrella organization. A PMA could serve either of these organizations in distinct ways by creating a container and a private agreement among the members. If properly established, a church can provide tax exemption and could be founded within a trust or given a charitable trust to manage resources for it. Remember, a PMA could function as a trustee of a trust or perhaps more usefully, beneficiary. A PMA can define membership in the congregation of a church or membership in a health and wellness practice or community supported agriculture or other farm to people food initiatives. Any of these lawful structures could acquire an EIN and open a bank account. And regardless of which structures you choose, I strongly recommend redeeming and demanding lawful money in every banking interaction. And to learn more about banking and lawful money, go ahead and help yourself to the Outer Sovereignty Starter Kit. I'll link it in the description to the video. It goes in depth into jurisdiction, public and private, how to redeem lawful money and why that works. And also you get a free PMA template in the Outer Sovereignty Starter Kit. So go ahead and help yourself as your next step, and I will see you in the next video. Blessings on your way.